Evolution.org Hardcore 2.0 is coming your way, 166 number episode. Today we're going to talk about localized BPC157 and TB500 injections. How? With Pharmaqo. So this is going to be a very important podcast. This is two peptides that have really been growing in popularity the past few years. And Mobster and I have done podcasts talking about them individually on different podcasts. We've talked about them as part of Stacks. We talked about them a little bit. But we're bringing in Noah on this one. He's going to bring a fresh perspective and kind of dive under the hood on this one and kind of explain what BPC 157 is, what TB 500 is. We're going to talk about how to dose them. We're going to talk about our personal experiences that we've had with them. We're going to talk about how to stack them with Pharmaqo steroids so you can have a successful cycle, pain-free, and not and how they can prevent injuries on cycle and also help with existing injuries on cycle. And then we're going to talk about why we love Pharmaqo. So first, let's remind everybody, if you're listening to this on different platforms out there, we are on Apple, we are on Spotify. I like to listen to it while I'm driving on both platforms as well. If you have Bluetooth on your car, it's very easy to connect, or any type of automation in your car. And look, at the end of the day, without your support, we can't continue this podcast. So make sure you're commenting, you're rating the podcast, you're liking the podcast, you're subscribing to the podcast, all that good stuff, so we can keep this show going. Because if that doesn't happen, then the show is not going to continue anymore. So we've been doing this for years and years and years, and we've had different guys come on. This episode, we got Mobster and Noah. We've had Mobster on the show for many years now, I think 3-4 years. So let's keep this going. Let's keep spreading the positivity and the knowledge. Okay, we're trying to give you in this hour tons of information to help you succeed. It's like if I'm watching a fishing YouTube video and I'm gonna go fishing, I want to see the guy or the gal recommend the proper bait, the proper spot, how to fish, what rig to use. I want to succeed when I go fishing. Same thing, you listen to this. You want to succeed when it comes to the stuff we're talking about, so you're more successful, present and future. So let's make sure we're subscribing. Mobster, really quick, any adds to that before we get into it?
No, absolutely, Steve. Just echoing Steve's sentiments, which is, guys, we want to, as before, to make this a reference. You come here, we give you solid ass advice, the right way to do things based on our experience, based on what we're seeing out there in the PED world. And make sure that you share it with your friends and buddies, because we think the information we give out today is going to be stuff that's valuable to so many more people than ourselves.
So let's give the floor to Noah, and let's talk about what is BPC 157. I can remember I had a buddy of mine come up to me and he's like, Steve, I got a bad shoulder. Some people in the gym are talking about BPC. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the stuff is. I just know that I want to try it out. So before we start, putting things in our body, it's important to know what they are. So Noah, tell us what BPC 157 actually is.
So BPC in a nutshell is body protective compound 157. Most guys might not realize it's a synthetic peptide which has promising preclinical data. And the preclinical data suggests that there's potential therapeutic benefits in tissue healing, specifically inflammation reduction and gastrointestinal protection. So anybody with, IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, you guys might actually find this very promising for future use, depending on your situation. So it's unique in its stability in gastric juice, and it allows for various administration routes, including oral delivery, which some guys might not know that there is actually oral BPC out there. So the animal studies have consistently demonstrated that there are positive effects across a range of conditions. The evidence from clinical trials does remain limited. I do want to preface that. But BPC in a nutshell, for me, I can fully state that my knee, I have arthritis in it, and I've been using BPC off and on, I'd say for, I think like a year almost. And man, I could tell you that the flexibility and the mobility in my knee has vastly improved over that year time. to the point to where I used to not be able to squat, and now I squat regularly on leg days every week. So just for guys in general, like if you've got a mobility issue or a limitation, whether it's in the elbow, the knee, shoulder, that kind of thing, it's very promising for tendon and joint repair as well. So if you guys have been kind of sleeping on BPC or kind of on the fence about using it or not, I would definitely give it a shot, because there is a lot of promising data that shows that it definitely can help in a lot of different scenarios. So I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that, but that's just
Yeah.
kind of my opening for
Yeah.
BPC.
So I'll bring in Mobster. But look, at the end of
Yeah.
the day, these peptides, I had a peptide expert years ago come on the show back when
Yeah.
we had Coach Trevor. He's one of Coach Trevor's buddies, a young guy. And this guy knew every peptide. He could tell you how to use them. He could tell you everything. And one of the things he stressed when it comes to peptides is these peptides are found in our body already. So what we do is we're getting basically, it's almost like adding
Yeah.
more. It's kind of like,
Yes.
it's like testosterone. You
Yeah.
take testosterone, synthetic testosterone, you add more of it, or growth hormone, you add synthetic growth hormone, you add more of it. It's the same thing. So gastric juices that we already have, just imagine you're taking it from one spot and you're putting it into an injury. And in this
Yeah.
case, we're talking about the injectable BPC. So you're basically injecting it. And what Noah said about, people with IBS and all this other stuff too,
Yes.
that's interesting. And that's something that we don't know much about yet. I don't think we've had.
We did do that show, Steve, with my buddy, the one that was trying the oral
Yeah.
version
And it
combination
helped
of these
him.
two.
And it helped
Yeah,
him.
I mean, it helped with his sense of well-being. It's not the
Yeah.
cure
Yeah.
for it
But
was
did he
for
say that it
IBS
helped
or
him?
Crohn's.
But did it say it helped with his Crohn's? He wasn't really sure because he was
No,
doing
he
other
said the
things.
overall sense of well-being had improved. So I think it was one of those base things, but they're
Yeah.
still looking for a cure for
Yeah.
Crohn's
So
in
I
and of
think
itself.
over time we'll start noticing some guys. It's because it's very hard to really determine things in the stomach. But one thing we have seen, as no one said, is those of us, including me, including Mobster, including Noah, who
Yeah.
have tried it, have noticed improvements. So we're going to get that later on the show. So the
Yes,
bottom
I'll go
line
for
is
that.
with these peptides is, they do serve a purpose, and we're seeing more and more people using them, and they're finding legit with Pharmaqo, they do have a long list of peptides as well as steroids, and we're going to talk about how to
Let me
use
just
them.
touch on
But
one thing then, Steve. I mean, what I mentioned to Steve in the pre-show is that in the last, I'm going to say 10 or so years, and I think I've been with Evo for 7 years. Prior to that, I saw the occasional hint of TB500, saw the occasional mention of BPC157. And in that time, we've seen repeated positive cases of guys with injuries using these two compounds to heal injuries, to recover from injuries. And I can't think of one single negative. I can think of maybe a couple where there wasn't a response in terms of the person coming back and saying whether it had worked or not. But all the rest, probably 98, 99%, had some degree of success. So the popularity is huge. The use is huge. The recommended to your buddies is huge. And I've literally had conversations with gentlemen of a certain age, older than myself, in the gym and heard of positive results for our shoulders, for, as we said, that sense of well-being. And literally, as we said, we're dealing with today, recovering from injuries that you guys may have got in the gym.
Noah, go ahead.
So yeah, so I was going to mention a couple things, and I'm going to touch on a little bit that you guys were talking about just now. So I want to mention the effects to touch on the digestive system to keep going with IBS, and then I also am going to bring up the mechanism of action interacting with the body at a cellular level. So BPC157, like I had mentioned, had demonstrated protective effects on the gastrointestinal tract. So the interesting part is it plays a role in maintaining the gastric integrity. It also can protect against damage, including various, now this is the cool, interesting parts, by various agents such as alcohol and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or NSAIDs for short. So its origin from gastric juice strongly suggests there's a primary role with maintaining gut health and mitigating damage from various stressors. So this has led investigations into the potential for treating ulcers, IBS syndrome, and inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD. So I think that's actually pretty promising for a lot of guys, especially with the common stressors of today, with the air quality that we breathe and the foods we eat and all the other things. We have a lot working against us. So using
Isn't
something,
it, no, isn't it interesting that the body actually has a method to protect us from these things in and of itself already? So it's
yeah,
amazing how the body works. And then, of course, here we are. All we're doing in these two products, these two peptides, is taking something that already exists to do exactly this and kind of boosting it in the body. That's fantastic.
yeah, I knew where you were going with that, and it is like as I was reading these studies and researching for today's show, I just couldn't help but think that is something that is revolutionary in a way because yes, while we have that, sometimes getting a little bit extra can go a really long way in helping the body heal because as you know, we all use steroids which are inflammatory, right? So if you're tossing something in the mix that is anti-inflammatory and can help heal inflammatory issues in the body, that's a win, especially with what we're doing and the stressors we put our bodies under. So the other thing that's interesting, Mobster and Steve, is the mechanism of action. So body protective compound 157 exerts its effects by influencing various cellular processes. So the studies have shown it promotes cell survival under stress conditions. It enhances the mitigation of cells, both of which are critical for tissue repair if guys and gals aren't aware. The ability to protect cells from damage is fundamental to the healing process. Furthermore, BPC 157 will interact with growth hormone receptors. I'll repeat that, growth hormone receptors. We all know how important those are for what we're doing in and outside of the gym in recovery and
Yep.
building muscle.
Recovery,
So,
yes.
yep. So potentially increasing the expression in tender fibroblasts, that is the upregulation which could potentiate the effects of growth hormone, which that is known to stimulate tissue regeneration and cellular proliferation. So the peptide will also play a role in promoting nitric oxide synthesis and angiogenesis. And that possibility is through the activation of the vascular endothelial growth factor receptor 2. So what do you guys think about that?
I mean, I'm sold. I mean, man, it does a lot of good stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like a wonderful thing to add to any cycle, because it's gonna help with everything. That really and
I'll phrase it another.
it's gonna
Yeah, I'll
offset
phrase
the
it up. Yeah.
negative it's gonna offset the negative traits of anabolic steroids and enhance the
Think
positive
about the
traits.
way that, yeah, think about the methodology of action that he's just described, listeners, and literally you describing the healing process that should naturally occur anyway. You know, if you cut a cut on your hand, it scabs over, the blood goes there, that all coagulates, and then you get a scab, and then the healing process underneath begins, and hopefully you end up with a very small scar. And you go, okay, we don't even think about those things. So we don't think about how the body works. And yet at every level, the way that Noah described it is essentially boosting every single way that the body heals itself. It puts blood where it needs to go, it takes blood away from where it doesn't need to go, it reduces the inflammation, gives the body a chance to repair. I mean, when we get into the TB500, it's literally increasing amino acids in those particular areas that require scar tissue, that require tissue repair. So think about the methodology of action. I'm fascinated, as I said earlier on, guys, and Steve and I have addressed this on other shows when we talked about the reason why your body does what it does comes from nature, the reason why we survived as a species to this point in time. And the reasons why, for example, if we had an injury in nature back in primitive times, we wouldn't be able to hunt, we wouldn't be able to feed ourselves, we wouldn't be able to water, we wouldn't be able to defecate. So in the gym, we try to stress the body as much as we can. We risk injury, and I'll get into that momentarily. But the way that our body repairs from the gut lining outwards, so that you can literally digest the food, which enables you to heal. Think about it in those terms. It's fantastic how the body works. And again, with both of these compounds, you are literally enhancing the body's ability. It's not surgery. It's not literally can't move. You're gonna have to lay there. You can't do nothing. It's the body working at molecular levels and being assisted to do that in a particular way. Testosterone we kind of get, growth hormone we kind of understand. These peptides and the reasons why they exist and the reasons why the investigators studied these peptides for various medical conditions, never mind just simple injuries like we're discussing, is amazing. I think the phrase you used just now, guys, was revolutionary. That pretty much sums it up, don't you think, Steve?
I think so. I'm curious, Noah, anything you want to add to BPC before you move us on to TB500? Because that's
Yeah.
some great information so far.
Yeah, well, the thing that I want to say, it's I'll touch on a couple things, but it's kind of simple. If you guys can increase nitric oxide synthesis, your pump is going to be out of this world. Now think about it. A lot of the gear we take, it's going to increase the pump on a superhuman level almost. But if you can increase the nitric oxide flow throughout the muscles, the tissue in the body, now you just increased your pump even more than what you've already established with the gear. And so when you use Pharmaqo products along with Pharmaqo BPC, now you've got the best of everything. Like if you thought you had a crazy pump before, try a little bit of BPC with some of the Pharmaqo products, and it's just kind of a match made in heaven. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up was so the endothelial nitric oxide synthesis, or ENOS for short, the pathway, it's enhancing NO production, improving blood flow and vascular integrity. Think about that, vascular integrity, some of the things that we're damaging along the way with the gym, and super important for recovery. So it's essential for delivering oxygen and nutrients to damaged tissues. So when you use BPC, it's also going to help with nutrient partitioning and influences collagen formation and the fibroblast activity, like I mentioned earlier. So these are all critical factors in regenerations of tissues. The peptide also may interact with other signaling pathways, including back Paxilian and JAK2, which is suggesting a complex involvement in cell adhesion, migration, and proliferation. So keep those in mind. This is a wonderful compound that if you guys and gals haven't tried, I definitely recommend it. And that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on, was just to kind of bring up
Those last two things, those last two attributes you just gave it, Noah, arguably, and here's the thing, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of arguably microdosing certain products, but think about what Noah just said, listeners. There's a potential, therefore, as Noah said, arguably a better pump. There's another boost which will come with TB500. I'll get to in a moment, and even arguably cell healing, as in recovering just from your normal workout, not necessarily needing to use either of these compounds because you've got injured, but actually increasing, in the same way that anabolic steroids do, your ability to recover from a brutal, grinding, oh my God, what was I thinking kind of workout, the kind of stuff that you might be doing pre-competition as a strongman or some kind of athlete. I mean, just to touch on this before I move on to TB500, we do these shows based on the listeners, the typical person that's listening to this show, and so on and so forth. Steve, I'll just bring you in for this one before we move on. The idea of athletes of all sports using healing peptides, for the way that we know that certain athletes in pro sports like American football, basketball, baseball, etc., are constantly pushing the envelope in terms of what they're able to do. The numbers go up, the javelin gets thrown further on an athletic field, and so on and so forth. And the risk of injury becomes incredibly high, but also the chance to enhance your performance. So whether you're a bodybuilder, bigger muscles, or the chance to throw that javelin further, pump the ball further, whatever else. So what do you think on that as far as professional athletes using these peptides as well?
Yeah, and it sounds really amazing. It sounds amazing. So we gotta, a lot of us are using it, and a lot of us are reporting. I talked to the buddy of mine who was into it, and he does a lot of CrossFit type stuff, and they really destroy their shoulders. And I actually followed up with him last weekend about it, and I said, did that BPC? He had been on like 2 or 3 months of BPC. I said, did the BPC work for you? And he looked at me, and I was shocked at his response. He was like, "Oh, dude," he's like, "it helped a lot." So I mean, we're seeing people that have used it with really, really positive types of effects. So those of you out there who are curious about using it, come on the forum, get a log going, get some Pharmaqo BPC, and see if it helps you, and be honest about it. Because we've all had different experiences, which we're going to get into shortly. But I really want to move on and get to TB500.
I'm just thinking, Steve, as we move on, of longer professional athletic careers. So that's definitely something maybe to talk about in the future. Yeah,
there's no way he's not on a healing protocol like that. You don't become 40-something years old and play at that high level. There's no way.
Yeah. I mean, we know they work harder on recovery than ever before. And the idea of using these to enable that recovery and to lengthen your career, lengthen your time playing whatever sport it is, there's got to be something for them to look at, as well as us bodybuilders and people who lift weights. Let's talk a little bit now about TB500. So Pharmaqo beta 4, as it's more technically required, is a naturally occurring peptide present in almost all animal and human cells. And again, like we said with the BPC, from the gastric juices, again, present in your body already. It's a synthetic peptide that has been directly linked to recovery, as it plays a vital role in building new blood vessels, similar again to BPC, new small muscle tissue fibers, again, enhancing bodybuilding, never mind injury recovery, cell migration, and blood cell reproduction. If you're an injured athlete, all these properties are something that becomes very desirable to speed up the recovery process. I'll move on now briefly, and again, we're working from the script here as far as this part's concerned. The mechanism of action, and I want to focus again, guys, on how the body repairs itself and how TB500 is enhancing that. So the main functionality of TB500 hinges on the ability to upregulate cell-building proteins like actin, as I mentioned earlier. Upregulation of actin allows TB500 to promote cell migration and proliferation. Again, more healing, better growth. This not only helps build new blood vessel pathways, but also regulates inflammation directly, again, similar to BPC. And that is correlated with wound healing. Its versatility even extends to the molecular structure and no molecular weight, meaning it's easier to be absorbed into the body and go directly where it needs to. It's traveling from the gut or through the place of site injection. We'll deal with that also momentarily. This also means when targeting injured areas, for example, chronic or acute, it has the ability to circulate the body and find those areas. Now, I'll just bring Noah back in for a second. In terms of TB500 being, I believe, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, the one you can inject anywhere on the body, although site injection, and we will get to the dosages, etc. as well, is preferred. Whereas I believe BPC, Noah, has to be site injected to be truly effective. There's an argument for the oral and the sprays and the topical solutions, but ideally, BPC should be injected where the injury is, whereas TB500 could be jabbed in your arse, your shoulder, etc., and will migrate to the area of injury. Is that correct for BPC, Noah?
Yeah, Mobster's absolutely correct. My experience is only with injectable BPC.
Yeah.
So for me,
that would be my preferred choice, but they're both available. But it's that one where both, in my opinion, guys, and I don't think I'm wrong here, if I had an injured elbow, I would attempt with either compound in an ideal world to jab in and around the elbow area.
That's a hard one too.
Yeah, it's one of those.
I've done it before, and it's very awkward trying to get in there, but it can be.
I'm just using that as an example.
No, I just think it's a common one for an injury.
Generalized.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
So let's, Noah, why don't you talk about TB500 more in depth, kind of get under the hood before we get into how to dose and where to dose and stuff, so we keep it more in order.
Yeah. So this is kind of, so this is a little bit of research that I've been doing. And so thymosin beta 4, TB4, it's a protein in humans that's encoded by the TMS-B4X gene. So that is located on the X chromosome with a homologous sequence on the Y chromosome. So that gene is notable for escaping X inactivation. So the complete amino acid sequence of TB4 consists of 43 amino acids, which is pretty insane when you think about it. So TB4 is basically, in a nutshell, it's classified as an acidic peptide. It's water-soluble polypeptide and is a major cellular component found in numerous tissues with intercellular concentrations, potentially reaching up to 0.5 mm protein conformation. So the analysis had indicated that there's a high helical content in specific regions of TB4 amino and acid sequence. So the interesting thing about TB500, it's saying that there's a chemical abstract service, which is CAS. The TB500 exhibits solubility in water with reported values ranging from 50 mg in ml to 250 mg in ml, depending on the specific preparation. Um, Let me see here. I'm just kind of going through my notes here. I wanted to kind of touch on the biological functions and mechanisms of thymosin beta 4. It's recognized as a major intercellular G actin sequencing peptide that plays a pivotal role in regulating the polymerization of actin. Actin is a fundamental compound of the cytoskeleton and is crucial for cell morphology and motility. So TB4 forms a one-to-one complex with globular actin, G actin, which is preventing its assembly into thymulus actin, or F actin for short. So thereby it acts as a buffer for monomeric actin. So the release of the G actin monomers from TB4 complex is part of the mechanism that drives actin polymerization, which is essential for normal cytoskeleton function in cell shape movement. So the interesting thing about all of that is beyond the intercellular role, TB4 exhibits a remarkable diverse range of effects when present in the extracellular environment surrounding tissue cells. So that's suggesting in the study that a general role in tissue regeneration comes from TB4. So these activities include promoting cell migration, a key process in wound and tissue repair. It also promotes angiogenesis, the formation of new blood cells, which is vital for delivering oxygen and nutrients to healing tissues. So if you guys combine BPC with TB500, you
Yeah.
have the ultimate healing stack. Now, if you did some Pharmaqo growth hormone at a therapeutic dose of about 1.5 to 2 IUs on top of that, think
Yeah.
of the healing stack you have. Because the interesting thing with the TB500, um, so it's vital for delivering oxygen and nutrients to healing tissues. It also demonstrates anti-inflammatory properties by modulating the levels of cytokines and chemokines. It also exhibits anti-apoptic and cytoprotective effects. So that means it's going to protect cells from damage. It's going to promote their survival. And TB4 has been implicated in stem cell differentiation and recruitment. So what that means is it's basically going to provide injured tissues with healing. And
Yeah.
the other crazy thing that I think is really cool about this, it functions in a neuroprotective way and it works within the central nervous system. And everybody knows when we go really hard in the gym and we beat
Yeah.
ourselves up,
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
putting so much stress on the central nervous system.
Yes.
So I think that that is insanely awesome that this is also neuroprotective. So what do you guys think about that? I know I said a
Well,
lot of
yeah.
scientific jargon.
Let me just say this really quick, Monster, before you lay in. It's funny because I didn't know this about TB500 when I used it a couple years ago, but when I was going really hard with cardio and really overtraining and doing these really crazy like hot yoga classes and stuff and doing these long runs and stuff, I noticed that I was able to get more endurance and able to push myself more and easier and able to recover quicker from
Yeah.
each workout. So people think that TB500 is just to repair injuries, but what Noah just said, all that scientific stuff that he said, all goes hand in hand with what I experienced, which was
Yes.
the faster recovery from these absolutely brutal workouts. So if I'm recovering from those brutal workouts, imagine what a weight trainer would recover from in the weight room. That's things that you don't notice, these little subtle improvements that you notice
Yes.
from workout
Yes.
to workout that it allows you to do and protects your cells in the process. That's really, an amazing thing to combine them. Go ahead, Monster.
I'm thinking more of some of the stuff that I've seen elsewhere as a side kind of research, if you like. And we've actually seen these mentioned within the field of bodybuilding, weight training, and so on. So, one of the attributes of bodybuilding has been for years that other athletes have learned from bodybuilders that better nutrition equals better recovery, equals better results on the field of play. And that was the number one thing they seemed to get. The way that we use steroids and research and peptides and what we call performance enhancing drugs is something that other athletes have benefited from. So I've just made 3 little notes here. One is specific to the phrase that Noah used, which is neuroprotective. So literally the arguably one thing that you might want to look at in terms of performance, and I've described this as coming from Olympic weightlifting, but we pass it on to other sports, of course, is the idea of enhancing the signal from the brain to the muscle to get a better contraction. So anything that's neuroprotective will enhance that. Gut health and the study, arguably, of what's called the microbiome is something that's been coming enhanced in the last 5 to 10 years again, guys. And the idea, for example, with BPC coming from gastric juices from the gut and the health of the gut as an important thing in terms of your overall sense of well-being, your central nervous system recovery, as Noah mentioned, and just literally your ability to absorb nutrients while you're smashing the granny out of yourself in the gym. And then finally, something which is kind of almost probably back to my school days, where we would study the cells in the body, but we was always looking at the inside of the cell. And it's what we're now looking at is the actual cell membrane and how the cell membrane allows things to pass through the cell membrane into the cell and how those cells repair throughout the body. And this is not just the muscles, and the tendons and the connective tissues that we're discussing here today, but stuff like, and I'll just do this with regards to TB500, healing of the heart. And here's an additional side effect boost for you guys, that some users also reported regrown lost hair and even reports of greyed hair darkening. Think about that again. Good gut health, when we see society as a whole eating poor food, the proliferation of illnesses and diseases generally in society, and your ability to resist those with good gut health, your ability to absorb more nutrients as a bodybuilder, just by having good gut health. Steve, talk very briefly about great gut health, etc., from fasting before we move on to dosing and so on.
Yeah, and when we're as a bodybuilding people do constantly throwing food at your gut never has an opportunity for a break. It's like running your lawnmower all summer, and not giving the engine a break, and your engine gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and it doesn't have a chance to recover. So that's, if you're going through a recovery phase with some injuries, combining all the stuff we talked about, the TB500 and BPC, and then doing fasting on top of it, that would speed up your cell autophagy and anti-aging. All the stuff that we've talked about, it would be even sped up even more. So, repair, recovery, a lot of this has a lot to do with that. So, Noah, talk about human trials before we move on and how to dose them, because it's very important to know that.
Yeah, so that was the interesting thing that I found through all my research, more so on TB500 than on BPC157. So there's been a couple phase 2 clinical trials in various medical conditions, and I'll touch on a couple of them. So TB4 eye drops, if you can believe it, in clinical trials had significantly improved the signs and symptoms of severe dry eye disease, including reductions in ocular discomfort and corneal straining. So the promising results have led on to phase 3 clinical trials, which is very hard to get through. Most people don't even pass phase 1, let alone phase 2.
No.
So there's neurotrophic chiropathy and dry eye disease studies have also indicated potential benefits of TB4 in promoting corneal wound healing and in treatment of neurotropic chiropathy. So here's an interesting thing as well. Mobster touched on this a little bit, but I'll further expand on it. In the field of cardiology, clinical trials have investigated the use of TB4 in patients with isometric heart failure. Some evidence suggests that elevated levels of TB4 in plasma are associated with improvements in cardiac symptoms following stem cell therapy. A pilot clinical trial also indicated that TB4 may be effective in treating patients after an acute ST segment elevation, which is basically a myocardial infraction, or STEMI for short. And this is the most interesting part. TB4 has been explored in its role in dermal wound healing. Phase 2 clinical trials in patients with stasis and pressure ulcers showed that TB4 accelerated the healing process in some individuals. Research also suggested that potential applications of TB4 in treating neurological injuries such as stroke and traumatic brain injury, although extensive human clinical trial data in this area is still emerging,
Yes.
studies have hinted at a possible role for TB4 in managing non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD for short, by mitigating oxidative stress and pro-inflammatory factors. Some research also suggests that TB4 could potentially improve hair growth, as Mobster said. There's a
Yep.
phase 1 study for that in healthy volunteers. And the most interesting thing is TB4 and TB500s, there's a diverse array of potential therapeutic applications. So think about that, guys. I mean,
That's amazing.
yeah,
Talk about
it's like a wonder
healing
drug.
peptides. That's super
Yeah,
healing peptides.
yeah. That they should have called this super wonderful, amazing,
Yeah,
heal everything
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
peptide.
yeah.
It's like the snake oil
Absolutely.
salesman back in the day. You know, they got all these elixirs
Does
that will heal
everything.
you. You know,
Yeah,
that's what it
yeah.
reminds me of. But that's
Cures
just what I want to
wolves.
touch on before we
Yeah.
moved on.
Absolutely. It's amazing. I love the idea that there's all these different things. Talk
Yeah.
about the dosaging specifically for
Yeah.
BPC157, and I'll
Yeah, and
talk
I
about
just
it
want
for
to be clear
TB500.
too, just in case people are wondering. So TB4 versus TB500, which is what we're talking about. The only difference is, of course, the TB500 is synthetic. So unless you want to extract TB4 from a
The
live
cadaver.
person, you're going to have to go with the TB500 as a synthetic version. So it's
Yeah.
basically the same thing as synthetic testosterone, synthetic growth hormone.
Yeah.
It's the best we're going to have access to at this,
Well, now
That's
we know where
definitely,
Body
yeah.
Monster's going after he hears this
exactly.
podcast. He's going to
We,
extract it from someone
yep.
in a graveyard.
One day when we have the zombie apocalypse, those of you out there can start extracting it from live humans and go that way. So with B,
Yeah. Or from your silly.
so BP157. Look, at the end of the day, I'm gonna bring in Noah quick on this. Look, I found myself uh, keeping it simple: 250 micrograms to 500 micrograms, as close to the injury as possible. And that means if look, you have a deep injury, it's like a shoulder, you might want to use like a 25 gauge 1 inch needle.
Yeah.
But in most situations, like in smaller injuries, and Noah's going to get into it with his knee, obviously you're going to want to go with a slim pin, 1/2 inch, maybe 29 gauge or 31 gauge,
Yeah.
and go in that way. So Noah, talk about your injury and how you injected BP157 and how much you injected.
So I've always won just for myself. I like to err on the side of caution. So I always find it fascinating the minimally effective dose of things. I always like to start there for myself.
Yeah.
So for me, 250 micrograms to 500 micrograms, I typically am a 500 microgram user. And for me, I just do it 4 days a week. Typically, I'll try and do it mostly on my cardio days and then on my leg day. So I'm on a pretty strict regimen every week. It's the same 4 days every week. Just so I have arthritis in the right knee, as I've mentioned before. So typically I just go to the right hand side and just right on the side, there's just this little indent that I go right into the knee. And I just, like Steve said, 1/2 inch slim pin, 29 gauge, 500 micrograms. That's all I really do. I know some guys like to split it up, which you absolutely can split it up. You could do an AM and a PM injection. Me, I just like to do it all in one shot and just kind of get it over with because it's a quick 2 second thing and I'm in and out of the door, just done deal. But I have seen research suggesting some people have taken it all the way up to 750 to 1,000 micrograms. I don't see the point. I just think at that point you're just kind of wasting your money. You'd be better off served just kind of doing
Yeah,
a
and
little
these
bit of a loading
products,
phase.
these peptides are not cheap, by the way. Like
No,
that's one of the things like you'll notice they're not
and they're
cheap.
small vials.
Yeah. So to you,
I have seen other protocols suggested, and I think what that Noah's just said, and I'm sure Steve will agree. And I'm going to suggest the same. We're kind of giving you a starting point, and as Noah said, I think all three of us are fans of the lower dosage. And the way that this should work, guys, is start with the minimum amount and a frequency, cycles, etc., that we're going to talk about, and then go from there. By all means, come on the forums and see if people have had more success with different protocols. But these are the basic starting points for most users in terms of how much you're going to use and so on. So, for example, Noah talks about the right-hand side of his right knee. There's a little indentation there. I'm feeling it with my finger as I'm talking. But I know, for example, some people will put a small amount on one side of the wound or injury and then a small amount on the other side. Again, it's one of those, is that necessary? Does it heal you more? Is the reason for people using higher amounts because they think more is better? And we know that it doesn't apply to steroids. It doesn't necessarily apply to healing compounds. But again, there are other protocols out there. People have tried and experimented with other things, have more disposable income, and you know, they want to get the injury over and done with. So we understand why they do, but it doesn't always necessarily actually work out that way.
So let's move on to Noah, you have anything else to add on BPC157 tips?
The only thing that I was going to say about it was just the dosing protocol is going to differ based on how much backwater that you actually put into the vial. Now, I typically go 2 to 3 mils, but even that 1 mil difference from 2 to 3, that will change the unit that you're drawing to. Like if I use 2 mils, like in my combo, I have a BPC TB500 combo that I use, and I use 2 mils of backwater in a 5 mil vial. That means I just draw to the 10 unit line on a 100 unit insulin syringe. But if you use 3 mils, you're going to have to go up to the 20 line. So just keep in mind, the more backwater you put when you reconstitute the peptide, it's going to change your dosing protocol and what that 500 microgram or 250 microgram dose is going to look like on the insulin syringe. So I know a lot of guys who are new to peptides aren't really familiar with that, but I just kind of wanted to briefly touch on that. And I also want to touch on, when you reconstitute the vial, don't just squirt the water directly onto the peptide. It's almost like a drip feed method. You want to angle that syringe and go onto the side of the glass vial almost, and slowly drip, because if you just pound that thing with water like a stream, you're going to destroy the entire peptide, because these peptides and these fragments are very, very fragile, and the wrong move can completely not only destroy your wallet, but destroy your peptide. And now you're out in both ways. So I just want guys to be cognizant of how they reconstitute, and always make sure after reconstitution that you put it in the fridge and keep it there until you're ready to use it. And make sure after you draw that dose, put it immediately back in the fridge, because if that sits out at room temp for too long, it's also going to destroy the peptide. So I just wanted to give guys a warning and let them know, because some people are very confused with that. So I just want guys to get the most for their money and the most for their healing when they use these peptides.
There are online calculators that enable listeners to work out the milligrams or micrograms, as in BPC per mil that you're using. It can be confusing if you've switched from a larger syringe to the slim syringe that we use for these kind of peptides. We have seen this come up on the forums a few times. So by all means, come on, make sure that you're getting guidance for how to mix it specifically, as Noah just said, how to store it, as Noah just said, and how to measure it, so you know that you've got an effective dose in the mil or 2 mils or whatever you're going to inject. I'll just touch on briefly the dosing here. And again, like BPC, it's a powder. The same reconstitution applies with brachyacidic water, or it says here sodium chloride. Absolutely, like Noah suggests, same again in terms of preparation and safety, and just not squirting the water in, but dripping it in, but just by the side of the vial rather than straight onto the top. Gentle swirling. It doesn't need to be shaken or mixed in an obvious way that you might do with something else. And again, using pretty much one of the things here is, as a sort of a bit of advice, is don't mix up too much at once. Just mix up what you're going to use for the next couple of days. That's a bit of a pain in the ass for those of you that are time busy, but it's one of those necessities that, again, like Noah said, you're not wasting product, you're not wasting dollars. Regards dosaging, and again, these are starting protocols like I talked about before. Typically, guys, it's 2 to 2.5 milligrams twice weekly for 4 to 6 weeks. Some users have reported success in dosing higher, up to 8 milligrams a week, but it remains to be seen how effective that is. And then I've got, for example, here, guys, this is another suggestion. Beyond that, 1 or 2 monthly injections with 2.0 to 2.5.
You're talking about TB500.
Yes, in this particular example.
Yeah. Just want to make
milligrams, not micrograms. So again, the confusion with the amounts. Micrograms, as we know, is 1,000th of a gram, and 1,000th of a milligram, and a milligram is 1,000th of a gram. but it basically means in terms of the BPC, you would be using 1,000th of the amount that you would use with TB500. So keep that in mind. That's why the measurements and the way they're used can be a little bit confusing.
That's why I like combos of TB and BPC
because it's all done.
Yep. It makes it easy. Like 2 mils right in there, and then
done.
10 on the insulin syringe, and then I have my effective dose of TB and BPC instead of like 2 separate vials and trying to figure it out.
Yes.
If you can get a combination, it makes life a lot simpler for you.
I wouldn't obsess also. Sometimes the guys do this, whereas, it's a few micrograms for us and a few milligrams more. I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's the overall effect that you're looking for. Yeah. You don't have to be anal about it because you're just stressing yourself.
What do you guys think about front loading?
As you possibly can. And again, I mean, the products come, and I believe, for example, TB500 normally comes in a 5 milligram vial. I think I've got some here. I have seen other dosages. Again, Pharmaqo will have this work done for you, and you know that you're getting solid ass product from them. And we know that we've seen people have absolutely, as I said earlier on, guys, some amazing results. Something I'm going to talk about specifically, as experience. I want to reiterate something I've said on the other shows and keep it fairly short, guys. The reasons why you get injured, how that happened. Sometimes it's just habits that we get into, sheer wear and tear, the volume, not allowing plenty of time for recovery. I mentioned earlier on how top professional athletes of all sports focus, and as I said this on other shows, on recovery so much more than they ever used to, and it includes using these healing peptides. So look, guys, if you get that bad of an injury, listen to your doctor, make sure you do the rehab. If you are doing something that's constantly irritating an elbow or shoulder or knee, look at what you're doing and change that. We say that because we just did a show recently about shoulders and the things that we were doing that cause those injuries to occur. We want to give you the advice now so that you don't make the same mistakes as us. But if you do get injured, if an accident does happen, here you are with some advice on how to help yourself recover from those things. And again, so time off might be needed, change in exercise might be needed. Don't keep pounding away something that hurts. No. Don't wait till it's an acute injury.
So I already talked about my experience with these. I talked about TB500, but BPC really quick before I let Mobster and Noah talk about their specific experiences and how it's benefited them. I know with BPC with my shoulder, when I had my shoulder issues, I tried everything with my shoulder to get it going, but nothing seemed to work. Then I tried BPC and it really sped up the process. Now, did it heal my shoulder where I could go back in there and start benching 400 pounds and military pressing 2 and 3 plates? No, it did not. So it's not going to be a miracle cure. And I'm sure Noah will talk about that as well when it came to his knee. He's not going to go and be able to dunk a basketball like he used to and do track and field or go do sprints like he used to. But what it can do is it can speed up the process. So if you have an injury that takes 3 months to heal and you use BPC, it can cut that to 2 months or 1.5 months or 1 month. So that's the benefit. So I tell people all the time on the forum, don't expect miracles from this, because these injuries that we get are sometimes very, very severe, and we get older and it's wear and tear on our body, and we're not robots, and our bodies are made of flesh. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that, and don't just expect, I'm just going to pin BPC for a couple weeks or pin TB500 a couple weeks, and like magic, I'm going to be cured. So it's going to speed up your injury healing, but it's not going to cure it 100%. So that's been my experience. And I've had some injuries where it has not helped me at all. Some of my injuries have not helped me at all. Like, let's say you have disc problems. You can't inject into a disc. You can't inject close to a disc. You run the risk of causing spinal damage and paralyzing yourself. So never, ever, ever inject in your near your spine. You should always get a doctor to do that. And because these peptides are not approved yet, they're not going to have a doctor do it. I've had things injected into my spine before. I've had cortisone injected into my spine, for example. You have to have a professional doctor with years and years and years of education and training to do something like that. So no, don't get your girlfriend to inject your neck into the back of your neck or into your spine, because that's not going to be good. But TB500 injected into your stomach, which will travel around the body, or injecting the BPC somewhere close into your back could be an option for you. So just be very careful about that. And like in Noah's case with his knee, if you inject in the wrong spot in your knee, you could cause problems as well. So you want to make sure you know what you're doing with that. Go ahead, guys. Tell me your experiences and how they help.
Yeah, so for my experience, especially in my knee, I've had arthritis for years. It's mild in nature when it was diagnosed, but who knows if it's progressed or not. I haven't gone in and had imaging done in a few years now, but I know from when I started to where I'm at now, it's a night and day difference. It's not something that you're going to notice right away. It is something that you'll notice progressively get better over time as the weeks and months go on. That's when you'll start to really notice the recovery benefits and the healing benefits, at least in my personal experience. I noticed, like, even last night. So I had achy knees after I did an hour of cardio the other day, like especially my right knee. It just ached, and I injected BPC and TB, just 500 microgram into the right knee in the same spot I always go into. I woke up today, zero knee pain. I have great flexibility. I can move my knee, bend my knee, stand on it, do one leg squats, lunges, whatever I want, and I have zero pain. And that's kind of the benefit of it when you include BPC and sleep together. That is the perfect mechanism for healing. And I noticed after I went to bed and woke up this morning, I had no knee pain. And the beautiful thing about BPC or just TB, or either one, um, I noticed I could do cardio longer. Like, my coach only has me at 60 minutes, but there's times where I feel like I could do 2 hours. Like, it helps me walk faster. It helps me walk better uphill. I have
Yeah.
more flexibility, mobility. So it's kind of really neat in the fact that we have Pharmaqo and a quality peptide that they
Yep.
offer that you could utilize, and to be honest, it's such a simple injection. And Steve was mentioning you got to be careful with where you inject. And the nice thing about an insulin syringe is that the needle's so small, you don't have
Yeah.
to go super deep. You could just go slightly under the skin and inject it, because it's such a small amount. You don't have to go deep into the wound area, because you're not putting a high volume of oil or water into the area, so it's going to stay in there. Um, the cool thing about this is, you guys know I have anchors in my shoulder from my shoulder surgery. Speaking of shoulders,
Yes.
as mentioned,
Yes.
I thought about in the future. Now, this might be too far gone because the surgery was in 2016, and I've had years of abuse on this right shoulder. Kind of funny, right knee, right shoulder. Apparently, the right side of my body just hates me. But I'm thinking about running an experiment sometime in the future where I just inject into that shoulder joint, right into that scar tissue. I'm just like going to go right into that lump, and I want to see if it will minimize the inflammation, or if it will reduce
Yep.
the lump size, or if my
Yes.
stretching and mobility will get better. So that's something that I'm going to try. I don't know about you, Mobster, but that's something that I have on the horizon that I'm interested in trying.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, in terms of not necessarily my own personal experience, but in terms of people my age, and again, when we had Mark Williams on our show recently, Mark is a little tiny bit older than me. There's another buddy at the gym, Phil Thompson, who I believe is just around 70. We've got Ken. Ken Williams is in his 70s, and a couple of others, right? And here's the thing, guys, like it as not, us motherfuckers that have been training 20, 30, 40, in my case, 45 years and some more, will have natural aging issues, natural wear and tear. If we've been doing some kind of pressing for 30 years, we're going to have wear and tear on the shoulders. And that's whether that's from work stuff, people, some of the local fellas here would have been down the mines, heavy industry, or from hitting the gym. You're going to do stuff to your body, and it's going to have natural wear and tear. And that's without actual sporting injuries. And let me use Phil Thompson as an example, using as Noah talked about earlier on, a combination product, orally felt recovery in 4 days, and that was for a shoulder injury. Literally started to feel the healing effects, the benefits of using a company product like Pharmaqo in 4 days, guys. That is fantastic. When you've had pain and discomfort in an injury for years, and you love going to the gym, you love being in shape, you love being in hell. Phil's dating. Been on a dating scene recently, Steve, on probably on Plenty of Fish, going out with certain ladies also of a certain age. So the idea of being able to go to the gym and keep in the shape and being able to lift and date in your 70s is absolutely fantastic. And literally stood in the gym. This is a couple of months ago, prior to another show that we did, and just before I came home, sat in my office and recorded a show with Steve, had a conversation with Phil, had a conversation with Mark. Mark talked about an increase in well-being, which he discussed on one of the other shows, and Phil had a shoulder improvement in just 4 days. And this is in older athletes that have been training for decades. So you younger bucks shouldn't have the aging issue. You shouldn't have the sheer wear and tear issue. You might have actual injury issues and the ability. Let me just list this. I mean, we're going to talk about other products as well. So I've just looked at Pharmaqo. There's a 10 milligram TB500 product. There is a 5 milligram BPC157 product. And I've added a couple of things here, guys, that you can talk about that you might run as a healing stack. That's Osterine. They do a 25 milligram product. MK677, which they do a 25 milligram product. And I made a note here for Nandro their Deca at 300 milligrams, and they also do an MPP. So, guys, healing stacks. Just thoughts on that before.
I was just going to mention those, and Pharmaqo has you covered. They have great Deca, great MPP. Some of the guys on our forum that really lift heavy, these are the power lifters like you, Mobster. They swear by Deca and MPP. They love them as part of a stack to help them kind of, help go heavy and also help with the pain of going heavy. So that would be a great option. The growth hormone, we mentioned it several times. It's also a peptide, human growth hormone. And we've talked about that on previous shows. It's expensive, just like all these other peptides. It can be pricey. But if you can really afford and you just want to do peptides, you can do both the peptides we talked about, the TB and BPC, and do the growth hormone together. That would be a great healing peptide combined with some of the other stuff that we talked about as well, and kind of changing up your workouts, as Mobster mentioned earlier. But yeah, Pharmaqo has you covered. Anything you want to add, Noah, on different compounds that you would add to BPC and TB?
Yeah, I was gonna say, just as something that might help guys. Like as we mentioned earlier, we all know, like, steroids are inflammatory and they can compromise the immune system. You'd be doing yourself a huge favor and benefit by picking up a combination of BPC 157 and TB500 from Pharmaqo, because anything you can do to boost your immune system and your body's healing potential and mitigating inflammatory properties, it's a win, guys. So think of it that way. Like if you're going to spend all the money on a cycle and you want a successful cycle and you want to have fun and you want to stay healthy and keep your immune system firing on all cylinders, definitely look at adding in just maybe a little bit of HGH, like they said, with BPC and TB, or just TB or just BPC. Just give it a shot. What's the worst case scenario? You have some extra healing on your cycle, which is only going to benefit you for tissue repair, growth, and overall muscle gain over time. Because as we mentioned, with the androgen receptors and the growth like factors that you can get from BPC and TB combined, it's worth a shot. I mean, for me, this isn't so much. I mean, you could combine it with it, but the way I'm looking at it is when guys are in a heavy cut and they're calorie depleted, they're tired, they're sore.
Yes.
That is when you really want to deploy the BPC and TB, in my opinion, because something
the risk for injury is much higher when you're
exactly, and that's where I'm going with it. If you can put something in there that can offset and mitigate the potential injury factor and keep you a little bit more heavy on the endurance and keep you uplifted in your spirit and mood, why not add it?
Let me ask you a question now, and something I've seen. This ironic Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler back in the day videos, DVDs. You can find these on YouTube.
I remember those. The 2007
they both getting deep tissue massage, and one of the things that came from those deep tissue massages with the better therapists was you'd see them doing things like getting that shoulder, the arm above their head. They're laying down on a mattress, on a massage table, and the arms being extended, and with the deep tissue massage and really getting those thumbs into the joints, etc., so that the arm would actually extend fully above the head. as though you were trying to touch at the rim on a basketball court, versus only being able to get it out in front and so on. So the whole therapy thing, again, recovering from injuries, guys, get a massage gun, rest, ice the joint, heat the joint. Talk about that a little bit as well as what else there, Noah?
So the thing that I want to touch on is I don't think I mentioned it. I usually run TB and BPC for about 12 weeks at a time, and then I'll take about 12 weeks off. You can run them continually, but the way that I like to view things is moderation for me, because I feel like if I overuse these peptides, then eventually my body's just going to adapt to them and they're not going to be as effective, in my opinion. Now, I could be completely wrong in that line of thinking, but for me, I feel like taking adequate time off is also beneficial, just to kind of let your body go back to homeostasis and reach that baseline. These are peptides that I really only deploy when I know I need them. Now, you could use them in any case scenario if you want, but I like to have them on hand and store them in the fridge. So if something does come up, I always have them. So my experience, I've been running them, off and on for I'd say about a year now, here and there. I like to run them particularly in the winter months for me, mainly because that's when my knee really acts up, because we have really cold winters here. Sometimes it's -20, -30 degrees. Um, so that's pretty brutally cold with the wind factor. So my knee usually acts up quite a bit in winter. So that's usually when I'll run it more. Or like I said, I'll deploy it during like a cutting cycle when I know that I'm going to be hammering my body a ton on cardio and I'm going to be abusing my knee. But as far as like massaging, I never really thought too much into it, Mobster. I've thought about finding a therapist that does deep tissue, and I know it could help. I just know one thing: when you mentioned that just instantly made me clench my jaw, because I'm like, man, if I had a therapist go into that right shoulder with all that scar tissue, I'm gonna be screaming like a toddler, because I
Yeah,
feel like that's gonna hurt so bad. But I mean, it could definitely do um wonders, massage therapy. So I definitely agree with you that that's one thing guys sleep on. But
don't wait till you get injured, guys. Do massaging and stretching as a matter of course. Hot
yes,
yoga is one of Stevesmi's big ones for flexibility. Don't wait until there's scar tissue. Don't wait until you get injured, and arguably
Yeah.
you'll prevent
There's a
those injuries
reason
from occurring.
why when you go, Noah and I are talking about the NFL. There's a reason why when you go to a football game, basketball, hockey, any sporting event, baseball, what do you see them doing hours before the game starts? They're warming
Yes,
up,
way
they're
more
getting
than
their
before.
body ready, and
Yeah,
then they make sure they stretch every day. These athletes, you got 300-pound nose tackles in the NFL who can do
yes,
splits. Why? It's because it all works to prevent injury. So preventing injuries is important. Don't just depend
yes,
on these peptides to cure you because you weren't taking care of your body. It's about maintenance. Just like you have a lawnmower, you take care of your
yeah,
lawnmower. Just like your car, you take care of your car. You got to take care of your body and
yep.
make sure that you're doing the warm ups, you're doing the stretching, you're doing what you need to do. You should be stretching every single day. I
I had
like
to
to
learn that the
stretch.
hard way.
Yeah, me
yeah.
too. And yoga, if you don't like to stretch on your own, go take some yoga classes and you'll have some beautiful women in
That is
tight
true.
Yeah.
yoga pants to encourage
Oh
you,
no.
and that will be very fun. And if
I can't do yoga, guys. I brought that up to my coach one time, and he told me, "You're not a soccer mom. Get back in the gym."
yeah. Well, the thing is, the yoga that I do, don't go to old people yoga. The yoga that I do, 99% of people out there would not even be able to survive a class. So
Oh, I believe it. I've seen some of that stuff, and I'm
go
like, I'll
do
tear my
the har-
groin just looking at it.
go do the hardcore yoga, and it will give you will feel like $1 million when you leave. You will feel like $1 million. You'll be
Or a
so
sauna
loose
too,
and
for
yep.
that matter, a
Yeah,
So
sauna.
sauna helps.
so I want to hear
Talk,
from Noah and Mobster
yeah,
on your
yeah. Talk
Pharmaqo
about Noah why you
experiences.
like Pharmaqo. Why are they a company that you like?
So I like Pharmaqo just mainly because I have experience with their products and I know their quality. I know they work. I've used Pharmaqo products in the past. I actually have a log with Pharmaqo products. I just know that behind the Pharmaqo brand is quality. And when you come on to the evolutionary.org forums, you'll see a lot of guys that are going to say the same sentiment that I said. So using a brand that you know you can trust, you know it's properly dosed, you know you're going to get the proper compound every time you buy the compound you buy is vitally important for your success, because the last thing you guys want is to buy in a brand that you think you're getting one thing and then you're getting another thing. Because I've seen so many horror stories of guys thinking they got Primo and then they got injectable D-ball or something of that nature, and then they wonder why they have gyno or all these side effects. So behind Pharmaqo is quality, it's trust, it's something you know that you can depend on each and every time you purchase a Pharmaqo product. So how about you guys?
Absolutely, mate. I mean, honestly, if I'm going to spend on recovering from an injury, arguably hundreds of dollars, I want to be sure that the products I'm using are properly dosed, that they are exactly what they say they are on the label, that the sterility is top class, that the products have been tested. I want to be able to come on the forums, find people like Noah and look at their logs and say, look what Noah's doing, look at the success he's having, check out brands that way, talk about recommendations, talk about approved sources, and just know that the company that I've decided to use is good to go. I mean, look, I want to take. We don't want you guys to lose money. We don't want you to waste money. We want you to recover from these injuries. You're already in pain. Let's not make it worse by taking money out of your wallet, guys, and wasting your time. So we
100%.
want you to recover. We want you to get back in the gym. We want you to make great gains. Hell, if some of the additional benefits there, your grey hair is going to disappear. The hair that's regrowth started, better muscles, better pump. God damn. I mean, honestly, as we said, it's almost like discussing for today super peptides. And so we talk about why do we say about companies like Pharmaqo? Because we know, like no one knows from personal experience, that companies like Pharmaqo are out there putting proper products out, correctly dosed, that guys, listeners like you can use to help you recover from injuries, to get back in the gym, to do that thing that we, like you, love to do. We love working out. We love how we make our body respond. We like being lean or muscular or stronger. And listen, any kind of experience, and all three of us have had this at some point with injuries. Noah, I would argue, is potentially the worst in terms of surgery. Steve has had problems. I've had shoulder issues, and none of us want you to go for the pain and discomfort that we've had. So if you do get injured, if there is a way of improving your recovery, if there is a way of keeping your athletic career longer, making more money, looking after your family, then we're all for it, guys. What do you think, Steve, before we talk about
he had to take that shot at Noah. Noah, you're the worst.
Oh my God. You know what, dude?
I've seen the pictures.
Listen, I don't even know why I come on here and put up with this abuse between the Planet Fitness jokes.
You posted the photograph.
And you're just this peasant that gets injured all the time.
And he's the youngest too.
And you're the shortest. You want me to take shots at your height? Like what are we doing here?
Is
this a brawl or is this a podcast? I'm not sure.
You can see listeners, you can see surgery photographs that Noah's posted
with
the suitures that the surgeon took on Noah's behind to show him.
Hey, listen, I also have magnesium stitches in my tendon, which dissolved into bone. So I'm kind of bionic.
No, you're like that NFL draft pick who's like injured their whole career, and then they get drafted in the first round.
Hey, listen, it could be
worse. Why did you draft this guy?
It could be worse. I could have Tua Tagovailoa concussion on my team.
I know. Now we're gonna have all the Tuanon people.
It could be worse. Hey, I will say one thing though. The really nice thing though, like going back on topic a little bit. I will have an upcoming long where I'll be using Drostanolone, which is Masteron Inithate from Pharmaqo coming up. So, we don't just talk about these things. We actually
we do it. We're doing it.
And you can see in our logs that we use the products we talk about. So we're not just on here blowing hot air at you guys. We're literally telling you our experience, and you can see it.
I've been using MK677 now for coming up on 2 years, I think, guys.
Yeah, I've seen
someone actually mentioned about recovery, and I said, look, at my age, the stuff that I'm doing weights I shouldn't be able to do, personal records, stuff that's world class at my age, which is fucking amazing. And the simple fact that might well come down to the fact that I've actually started including MK677 to help me recover from those tiny little micro injuries that you barely notice.
My grandfather over here is way stronger than me.
Yeah. So come on the forum, everybody. Check out Noah's log. Check out Mobster's log. Check out my log. It's very, very good information. Noah has like 3 or 4 logs. His logs have tens of thousands of views. So they're very, very good.
That's why I
And he's
never
been
sleep,
a
Steve.
great guy, very knowledgeable, as you can see from this
Yes.
show. So check out Pharmaqo. If you want to know where to get Pharmaqo, if you want to know where to get BPC, TB500, come on the forum, ask questions. It's okay to ask questions. Any questions about this podcast, definitely come on and ask. That's what we're here for. So we'll, we hope to hear from you soon.
Yep. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It is our view based on our experiences and views on the topic. Our podcast are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.